At 3:17 p.m. on September 15, 1944, in a bare interrogation room at Ravensbrück concentration camp in Germany, a British woman named Odette Sansom stood naked before her Gestapo interrogators while they burned her back with a red-hot poker. She was 32 years old. She was a mother of 3 daughters living in England with their grandmother. She was a special operations executive agent who had been captured in France, and she was being tortured for the 14th consecutive day to reveal the names of her fellow resistance fighters. The poker seared into her flesh. The smell of burning skin filled the room. Odette screamed, but she didn't talk. She never talked. And that refusal would lead to one of the most extraordinary acts of humanity in the entire war. An act so unexpected that it would save her life and prove that even in the darkest places, compassion can survive. But what makes Odette's story truly remarkable isn't just that she survived torture. It's who she was before the war. Because Odette Sansom wasn't a soldier. She wasn't a spy by training. She was a housewife, a mother, a French woman living quietly in England, raising 3 daughters, married to an Englishman, suffering from partial blindness that should have disqualified her from any military service. This is the story of Odette Sansom, the housewife who became a spy, the mother who chose duty over safety, the prisoner who was tortured for months but never broke, and the woman whose courage inspired her captor to save her life at the risk of his own. Odette Marie Céline Brailly was born on April 28, 1912, in Amiens, France. Her father died in World War I when she was 4. By 1939, she was living in Somerset, England, with her British husband, Roy Sansom, and 3 young daughters, Françoise, Lily, and Marianne. She was a housewife, a mother, living a quiet life. She had poor eyesight from a childhood illness. She wore glasses. She wasn't athletic. She had no military training. Just an ordinary woman living an ordinary life. Then Germany invaded France in May 1940. Odette's mother was still there. Her homeland was under occupation, and she felt helpless. What could she do? She was a housewife in England with 3 young daughters and poor eyesight. In 1942, she heard a radio broadcast. The British government was asking for people who knew France well to come forward. People who could speak French fluently. Odette understood. They were recruiting for intelligence work, for operations behind enemy lines. She wrote a letter. She didn't expect a response, but the Special Operations Executive was desperate for French speakers, especially women. Women could move through occupied France more easily than men. They attracted less suspicion. SOE accepted her for training. She had to make the hardest decision of her life: leave her daughters. They were 8, 7, and 3 years old. Go to war. Risk never seeing them again. Her husband begged her not to go. "You have responsibilities here, to our children. This is madness." Odette told him, "If I don't go, what will I tell our daughters? That I could have helped but chose safety? I have to go. For them. So they can live in a free world." She left in March 1943. The youngest, Marianne, was 3. Odette held her and cried. She didn't know if she would ever return. SOE training was brutal. Weapons training, hand-to-hand combat, explosives, radio operation, survival techniques. Odette struggled. Her eyesight made shooting difficult, but she pushed through. Most importantly, she learned resistance to interrogation. They taught her to focus on something personal during torture. A memory, a face. Odette chose her daughters. She decided that if captured and tortured, she would think of Françoise, Lily, and Marianne. Their faces would give her strength to stay silent. In April 1943, Odette was dropped by boat on the coast of southern France. Her mission? Work as a courier for a resistance network in the French Alps. Codename Lise. She had false identity papers. She had a cyanide pill in case of capture. She was told, if the Gestapo takes you, use the pill. Death is better than what they'll do to you. She worked in France for 8 months, carrying messages between resistance cells, helping coordinate weapon drops, living under constant fear of discovery. Several times, German soldiers stopped her, checked her papers. She smiled, spoke perfect French, played the innocent widow. They let her go. In April 1944, the network was betrayed. On April 16th, German soldiers raided the safe house where Odette was staying. She was arrested, taken to Gestapo headquarters in Lyon. The interrogations began. The first interrogation was almost polite. A German officer asked questions: her real name, her mission, her contacts. She gave only her cover story. The officer smiled. "We know you're lying. We know you're British. Tell us what we want to know, and this will be easy. Refuse, and it will be very difficult." She refused. So the torture began. Sleep deprivation first. Lights on, 24 hours. Guards banging on her door every 15 minutes. No sleep for 5 days. She hallucinated, saw her daughters in the cell, reaching for them. They would vanish. But she didn't talk. So they escalated. Water torture. They forced her head into a bucket until she nearly drowned. Pulled her out. Let her gasp. Then did it again. She vomited. Choked. Thought she would die. But she didn't talk. They pulled out her toenails, one by one, with pliers. The pain was indescribable. She screamed, passed out. They revived her and did another one. All 10 toenails removed over 2 days. But she didn't talk. Then they burned her. They heated a metal poker until it glowed red, pressed it against her back. The flesh sizzled. Odette screamed so loudly other prisoners heard her. The guards laughed. They burned her 14 times over 2 weeks. 14 scars she would carry forever. Through all of it, Odette focused on one thing: her daughters. She would close her eyes and see Françoise's face, hear Lily's laugh, feel Marianne's small hand. That gave her strength, because if she talked, other mothers would lose their children. She refused to be responsible for that. After 2 weeks, the Gestapo officers supervising her interrogation, Hans Kiefer, came to her cell. She was barely recognizable, emaciated, covered in burns and bruises, missing toenails, barely conscious. Kiefer said, "You are the most stubborn woman I have ever met. 2 weeks of torture. You have told us nothing. What gives you this strength?" Odette whispered, "I have 3 daughters. If I talk, other people's daughters will die. I won't do that." Kiefer stared at her, then left. The torture stopped. Not because they gave up on information, but because Kiefer decided she would never talk, no matter what they did. Some people cannot be broken. In May 1944, Odette was transferred to Fresnes prison in Paris. Then in July to Ravensbrück concentration camp in Germany. Ravensbrück was a women's camp, designed to kill through starvation, forced labor, disease, and execution. Average life expectancy, 3 months. Odette was placed in solitary confinement. Night and fog prisoner, marked to disappear completely. No communication with the outside world. Complete isolation until death. Her cell was 2 meters by 3 meters, bare concrete, no window, no bed, just a wooden plank, a bucket for toilet, bread once a day, water once a day. Complete darkness except when guards opened the door. She was in that cell for 8 months, from July 1944 to April 1945. 8 months in darkness, in isolation, not knowing if her daughters were alive, not knowing if anyone knew she existed. Most prisoners in solitary confinement went insane. The isolation destroyed their minds. They would scream, bang on walls, stop eating. But Odette survived. She created routines, exercised in her cell, push-ups, sit-ups, pacing. She counted to 10,000 every day, sang songs in her head, reconstructed conversations with her children in her mind, remembered every detail of their faces. And most importantly, she refused to let the Gestapo see her break. Every time guards opened her cell, she stood at attention, clean as possible, dignified, defiant. One guard, a young German woman named Wilhelmina, began to respect her. Wilhelmina would sometimes slip extra bread into Odette's cell, small acts of kindness that risked punishment. Wilhelmina asked once, "Why don't you beg? Every other prisoner begs, but not you." Odette answered, "Because if I beg, they win. I can't control what they do to my body, but I can control how I respond. I choose dignity." By April 1945, the war was ending. Soviet forces approaching from east, Americans and British from west. SS officers at Ravensbrück knew what would happen when Allies arrived. They would be tried as war criminals. They began destroying evidence, burning documents, killing prisoners who could testify. Camp Commandant Fritz Zuren received orders to execute all night and fog prisoners before liberation. Odette was on the list. She would be shot, body burned, no evidence. But something extraordinary happened. Hans Kiefer, the Gestapo officer who had supervised her torture, was now assigned to Ravensbrück. He saw Odette's name on the execution list. He remembered her. The woman who wouldn't break. The woman with 3 daughters. Kiefer made a decision that would save Odette's life. He falsified her documents, changed her identity from British SOE agent to wife of Peter Churchill, claimed she was related to Prime Minister Winston Churchill, that she was valuable as hostage, that killing her would have diplomatic consequences. It was all lies. But Kiefer knew that if he could convince the commandant that Odette was important, she might be spared. The commandant believed it. Instead of executing Odette, he decided to use her as a bargaining chip. On April 28, 1945, Odette's 33rd birthday, Fritz Zuren came to her cell. "You're coming with me. We're leaving the camp." Odette thought she was being taken to be executed, but Zuren didn't take her to execution. He took her in a car toward Allied lines. For 3 days, Zuren drove through chaotic Germany. On May 1st, they reached an American checkpoint. Zuren surrendered. "I am Fritz Zuren, Commandant of Ravensbrück. I am delivering Mrs. Odette Churchill, wife of Winston Churchill's nephew, whom I kept safe." The Americans took both into custody, but Odette immediately corrected them. "I'm not related to Winston Churchill. I'm Odette Sansom, British SOE agent. I was a prisoner at Ravensbrück. This man was my captor." Zuren's face went pale. He had surrendered, thinking Odette would be treated as VIP and he would receive leniency. But she had just told the Americans he was a concentration camp commandant. Zuren was arrested, eventually tried, executed in 1950. But here's the extraordinary part. During Zuren's trial, Odette testified. But not just to condemn. She told the court, "Commandant Zuren saved my life. Yes, terrible things happened at Ravensbrück, but when he could have executed me, he chose not to. He drove me to Allied lines. That took courage. While he deserves punishment for his crimes, he also deserves recognition for saving my life." Her testimony didn't save Zuren from execution, but it showed something remarkable about Odette. She had been tortured, starved, isolated. But she hadn't lost her humanity. She could distinguish between the system and individuals within it. And Hans Kiefer, the torturer who burned her 14 times, was also captured, also tried for war crimes. Odette testified at his trial, too. She told the court about the torture. Every detail. Showed the scars, the missing toenails. But then she said, "I also want the court to know that Kiefer stopped the torture when he realized I would never talk. And later, at Ravensbrück, he falsified my documents to save my life. He broke the law of the Third Reich to protect me." The court asked, "Are you saying we should show leniency?" Odette answered, "I'm saying people are complicated. Kiefer tortured me. That's true. He deserves punishment. But he also saved me. Both things can exist in the same person. He was my torturer and my savior. I hate what he did, but I'm grateful that in the end, he chose humanity." Kiefer was sentenced to 20 years, released in 1955 after 10 years. He lived quietly until his death in 1975. His daughter later revealed he kept a photograph of Odette until he died. A photograph of the woman he tortured and saved. Odette returned to England in May 1945, reunited with her daughters. Françoise was 10, Lily was 9, Marianne was 5. Marianne didn't recognize her. She had been 3 when Odette left. Now she was 5. Her mother was a stranger. It took months to reconnect, to rebuild trust, to explain where she had been. But eventually, slowly, the family healed. Odette was awarded the George Cross, Britain's second highest decoration for gallantry. Also the French Légion d'honneur, Medal of Freedom from the United States. She became one of the most decorated women of World War II, but she rarely wore the medals. She said, "I didn't do anything special. I just didn't talk." But that's not true. Most people broke under Gestapo torture. Odette endured 2 weeks and never revealed anything. That's extraordinary. Odette lived until May 13, 1995. She died at age 82. She lived 50 years after the war. 50 years carrying the scars, the missing toenails, the psychological trauma. She had nightmares for decades, would wake screaming, thinking she was back in the cell. But she also had 50 years with her daughters, watched them grow, marry, have children, became a grandmother, great-grandmother, lived to see the world her sacrifice helped create. At her funeral, her daughter Françoise spoke. "My mother left us to fight a war. We didn't understand then. We do now. She didn't leave because she didn't love us. She left because she loved us enough to risk everything. She was tortured, starved, isolated, but she never broke. And because she never broke, other families stayed intact. She paid a terrible price, but she never regretted it." The story of Odette Sansom is about the complexity of humanity in wartime, about people capable of both extreme cruelty and extreme compassion. That the man who tortures you can also save you. That survival isn't about being strong, it's about having something worth surviving for. Odette survived because of her daughters. Every time pain became unbearable, she thought of them. They were her anchor, her purpose, her reason to endure. And she survived because of unexpected acts of humanity from her enemies. Wilhelmina, the guard who gave extra bread. Kiefer, the torturer who falsified documents. Surin, the commandant who drove her to Allied lines. Each made a choice to show mercy when the system demanded cruelty. That's the complexity of war. Evil people can do good things. Victims can forgive their torturers. Humanity survives even in the darkest places. Not always, not often, but sometimes. And sometimes is enough. Odette Sansom was a housewife who became a spy, a mother who chose duty over safety, a prisoner tortured but never broken, a woman who survived because of love for her daughters and unexpected acts of humanity from those who should have been only her enemies. 14 burn marks on her back, 10 missing toenails, 8 months in darkness, 2 weeks of torture, and through it all, one thought: my daughters. That's what saved her. Not physical strength, not training, just love. Just determination to survive so she could see her children again. That's the power of Odette's story, not as victimhood, but as proof of strength. Not as evil, but as evidence that humanity persists. Not as revenge, but as demonstration that forgiveness is possible. The housewife who became a hero. The mother who left her children to save other children. The prisoner tortured by her enemies and saved by them too. That's Odette Sansom. Her legacy isn't just survival. It's proof that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. That love is stronger than hate. That dignity can't be taken, only surrendered. And that even in concentration camps, even in torture chambers, acts of compassion can bloom. She was humiliated, tortured, stripped of everything. But she kept her humanity. And in the end, that humanity inspired her captors to save her life. One guard with extra bread, one torturer who falsified documents, one commandant who chose redemption. That's the miracle of Odette Sansom. Not that she survived, but how she survived, and what her survival meant for her daughters, for the families she protected by staying silent, for the example she set about courage and forgiveness, for the proof that even when humanity seems extinct, it's waiting for one person to show it still exists. Odette Sansom, housewife, mother, spy, prisoner, torture survivor, hero. Proof that the most ordinary people can have the most extraordinary courage, and that sometimes the enemy you least expect is the one who saves you. The water torture involved forcing her head into a bucket of ice-cold water until her lungs screamed. At the last second before drowning, they would pull her up, let her gasp, then plunge her back under. The cycle repeated dozens of times. Each time she thought, "This time I drown." The toenail removal happened over 2 days, with pliers. No anesthetic. The pain was so intense she would black out. They would revive her and continue. Some nails grew back, others never did. The burning was methodical. They heated the poker until it glowed orange-red, then pressed it against her lower back. 14 separate burns. The smell of her own flesh. She carried those scars for 50 years, never wore a swimsuit again. Between torture sessions, the Gestapo used psychological warfare. They claimed other agents had talked, that her network was destroyed. They showed fake documents saying Peter Churchill had betrayed her. They told her daughters were dead in bombing raids. The uncertainty was torture itself. What sustained her was a memory from 1941. The beach in Somerset with her daughters. Marianne laughing as waves washed over her feet. Françoise and Lily running into the water. During torture, Odette returned mentally to that beach. Her body was in an interrogation room, but her mind was with her daughters. That's how she survived. The 8 months in solitary tested her differently. Torture is active. Solitary confinement is passive emptiness. No light, no sound, no human contact. Odette experienced hallucinations. She heard her daughters calling, saw them in her cell. They vanished when she reached for them. She survived through discipline. 20 push-ups every hour, 50 sit-ups, walking her cell for hours. She reconstructed novels from memory, composed letters to her daughters mentally, solved math problems in her head, all to keep her mind from collapsing into the void. The guard Wilhelmina, who gave Odette extra bread, was only 23. She saw in Odette a dignity that persisted despite everything. Years later, she testified, "This woman, even after 8 months in solitary, would stand straight, look me in the eye, treat me with politeness. It made me ashamed. It made me want to be better." When Kiefer falsified Odette's documents, he risked execution. Why? In testimony, he said, "She impressed me. This housewife had more courage than any soldier I'd met. When I saw her name on the execution list, I couldn't let them kill her." When Fritz Surin drove Odette toward Allied lines in April 1945, he thought delivering a Churchill relative might buy leniency. It didn't work. But Odette could have maintained the lie. The Americans believed Surin's story. They would have treated her as VIP. But Odette told the truth immediately. "I'm not related to Churchill. I'm an SOE agent. This man commanded a concentration camp where thousands died." She threw away any advantage because truth mattered more. That's consistent with everything else. She refused to lie to save herself. Not during interrogation, not during imprisonment, not even when lying would cost her nothing. Her daughters grew up knowing their mother was a war hero, but also seeing the cost. Françoise wrote, "We saw medals and articles, but also her nightmares, her flinching when touched. We understood heroism has a price. But also, despite everything, Mum was wonderful. Damaged, but not broken. She taught us you can survive anything if you have something worth surviving for." When Odette died in 1995, her funeral was attended by hundreds: SOE veterans, Ravensbrück survivors, French resistance fighters, British officials, representatives from Yad Vashem, though Odette wasn't Jewish. They came because she represented something universal: courage to resist evil when resistance seemed hopeless, refusal to break when breaking would be easier, the choice to maintain humanity when everything around you is inhuman. Her gravestone reads, Odette Marie Céline Sansom, G.C., 1912 to 1995. She refused to abandon her post. Those words sum up everything. She didn't abandon her post during the war, during torture, during solitary confinement. Not even in 50 years afterward, when she could have succumbed to trauma or bitterness. She stayed at her post as mother, as witness, as example of what humans can endure and remain human. The story of Odette Sansom ultimately shows the complexity of human nature. The same war that brought out absolute worst in some, torturers, camp commandants, architects of genocide, also brought out unexpected good: a guard who gave bread, a torturer who falsified documents, a commandant who chose redemption. Her story resists simple narratives. We want pure heroes and absolute villains. But reality is messier. People are capable of both cruelty and compassion. The guard who beats prisoners today might save one tomorrow. The torturer can become savior. The victim can forgive without forgetting. Survival often depends on smallest acts of kindness from most unexpected sources. That's why Odette's story matters. Not just as history, but as a reminder that humanity persists. Even in concentration camps, even in torture chambers, there are moments of light. Not often enough. Not sufficient to excuse darkness, but enough to prove darkness doesn't win absolutely. That compassion survives. That one person's courage can inspire others, even enemies, to choose mercy. Odette Sansom proved ordinary people are capable of extraordinary courage, extraordinary endurance, and extraordinary grace facing unimaginable suffering. Her back carried 14 burn scars. Her feet carried damage from 10 missing toenails. Her mind carried 8 months of darkness. But her heart carried her 3 daughters, and that was enough. Enough to stay silent through torture. Enough to survive solitary confinement. Enough to maintain humanity when everything was designed to destroy it. Enough to forgive, partially, impossibly, beautifully, the men who hurt her, but ultimately chose to save her. That's the miracle. Not that she survived, but how she survived, and what she became. Not bitter, not broken, but somehow still capable of seeing humanity in everyone. Even her torturers, even her jailers. She saw them as human, capable of evil, yes, but also capable of good, capable of choice, capable of redemption, even if that redemption came too late. She believed no one is entirely evil, and she proved it by surviving because of small acts of kindness from people who should have been only her enemies. That's her legacy. Not just courage, but complexity, understanding that humans contain multitudes, that the same heart can hold cruelty and compassion, and that sometimes, unexpectedly, compassion wins. The housewife who became a hero, the mother who never forgot her daughters, the prisoner who maintained dignity, the woman who proved that even in hell, humanity survives, scarred, damaged, but alive. And that's the greatest miracle of all.